Hey everyone. Rico really killed it. I feel like that whole story about Excel just like made my heart light up because that's how I felt. So I kind of feel like Rico told the heart of my story, and I'll just talk about the edges of it because that really was what was going on inside my body when I was first learning Excel. I see some folks nodding their heads. Is there anybody else who kind of resonated with Excel being part of your journey? Yeah, lots of folks. Okay, cool. So last weekend I threw a retirement party for my dad. He worked at a life insurance company as a programmer for 42 years and just finished up. And at the party, our next door neighbor reminded me of this time when the neighbor asked me, I was a teenager at the time, if I wanted to be a programmer like my dad when I grew up. And I said, no, I don't want to be a nerd. So fast forward a couple decades and here I am. I'm officially a nerd. I'm a data nerd. I work here at Relic as a software engineer. So how did I get here? Well, I ended up staying at my first job out of college for 11 years. I was an organizer for the National LGBTQ Task Force, and it was my job to help turn the tide against the wave of discriminatory ballot measures that we're facing all over the country, from statewide bans on same-sex marriage to efforts to roll back affirmative action and further restrictions on reproductive freedom. So I spent most of my time on the road, sleeping in extra bedrooms of campaign donors and PFLAG parents. That's parents and friends of lesbians and gays. So throughout the dozen or so campaigns I worked on, I became kind of obsessed with perfecting the science of being a field director. I was the person that other campaign managers and field directors would call to crunch numbers or to help them figure out how to target their scarce resources for their get out the vote efforts to get those last few votes they needed to get over the top to win on election day. So I was pretty obsessed with collecting and analyzing data, not just the voter data, but also the internal campaign data that we used to track our progress towards our goals. So earlier you saw how to keep track of inventory. I was doing something similar for our statewide and local campaigns. I started building these really complicated tracking sheets in Excel that compiled all the data that staff and volunteers would fill out after every campaign action. How many doors they had knocked on, how many phone calls they'd made, votes secured, volunteers recruited, and money raised. And you can actually, the reason this was valuable is because you can actually learn a lot about what happened at a campaign event without being there, just by looking at the report. You can tell if the organizer did a good job of motivating people to work really hard, or if they trained them well and the quality of their work was good, just by the numbers in the report. So we started iterating on this tracker from campaign to campaign, and it started getting more and more elaborate, much like what you saw earlier with Rico. I loved the challenge of having a campaign manager or field director ask me to add one more thing, one more average, or one more calculation to the spreadsheet. And when I'd get a request to build this new feature, I would cherish the few hours I'd get to step away, not talk to anybody, just put on headphones and get in that Excel flow. So every morning I'd check the tracker and watch it fill up with another day's worth of data. And it was so beautiful to see those numbers just grow over time and those averages increase too. And I saved every campaign tracker because I was so proud of the tracker, but also our work. And I just felt like it encapsulated the story of every campaign that I worked on. Well, one of the field managers I worked with who used my tracker is this guy named Michael. We stayed in touch, and 8 years after we worked together on a campaign, we were still friends. Here in Portland, we had brunch, and he casually told me that I should go to his code school that he had started. He said he thought I'd be good at it based on our experience working together on campaigns. And by that point, I knew I didn't want to work on campaigns the rest of my life, so I was ready to try something new. So I went for it. So I signed up for Epicodus. Michael is Michael Kaiser-Nyman, who founded Epicodus. And I quit my job, and the rest is history. You know, I sometimes wonder how I missed the signs that I was destined to be a programmer, just like my dad. I mean, he did it for 42 years, and it's somewhere in my blood, right? He even was the person who gave me my name, Moof. That wasn't my given name, but he ended up giving it to me as a teenager. Does anybody know what that refers to?
Claris the dog cow.
That's right. You want to say a little bit more about that?
It's Claris the dog cow. It's an old Apple icon from the early days.
I missed the beginning. What does it stand for?
Yeah, so what this person was saying is that Moof comes from Claris the dog cow. It's an old Apple icon that's a combination of a dog and a cow. It's kind of like a dog with white cow spots, black cow spots.
I think it's an accidental combination.
Yeah, that's right. And so since it's a dog cow, it makes the noise moof. So my dad is a really big Apple fan, so we always had Macs growing up, and he gave me an Apple t-shirt that said Moof on the back, and it had a picture of the dog cow. So people just started calling me Moof from that. You know, I feel like since I have the mic, and it's part of my story, I just want to highlight some of the social forces behind it and not just the individual choices that I've made. So, you know, as an East Asian person, I'm 100% sure that the support and kind of guidance I received over the years to pursue math and later engineering went hand in hand with the so-called positive stereotypes of Asian people being good at math, especially men. The flip side of that, of course, is that it comes at a cost. And at more than one company I've worked for, there was always me and maybe one other person who were always put in charge of making those spreadsheets. One other Asian person, I mean. It was kind of like, you know, we got corralled into this track. And, you know, some of the costs of this kind of stereotyping are that, one, it further entrenches the perception of Asian and Asian Americans as a monolithic group. It also limits support for Asian and Asian American folks who want to pursue careers outside of STEM fields, or even within STEM fields. We often hit what they call the bamboo ceiling because people don't see us as leaders, or they don't see our potential as leaders. Third, I've experienced racialized resentment and fetishization from white engineers, which for me is compounded by being queer and a non-binary person. And lastly, or the last thing I thought of was it makes me complicit in anti-Black racism because what happens is Asian achievement gets weaponized against other communities of color. People say, if Asian people can do it, why can't these other communities of color? That happens through the work of the model minority myth. So I guess my point is just that larger social factors shape opportunities. They've shaped the opportunities that I've had, but they also shape the opportunities that we all have. And so I want to encourage folks to think about kind of being aware of how that's happened for you, whether you've kind of had the path cleared out for you or paved the way for you, versus the challenges that you might have experienced along the way. And so just be aware of it, you know, work to make yourself, your company, and your community a more just and equitable place. I guess I haven't totally left behind my community organizing roots, right? So I just wanted to end with a quote from Angela Davis, the famous Black activist. I think the importance of doing activist work is precisely because it allows you to give back and to consider yourself not as a single individual who may have achieved whatever, but to be part of an ongoing historical movement. Thank you.